So this is episode 3 of Combating Mental Health Struggles. Today is challenges that are overlooked during recovery, and we are here with Victoria DePinto, who is a licensed professional therapist.
I'm a licensed professional counselor in the state of Pennsylvania. I used to work in an eating disorder clinic in the step down program from inpatient. So it's like the clients would stay there all day to have several meals. Um, but now I work in the outpatient setting with multiple different mental health disorders, so not just eating disorders. Um, but yeah, so that's a little bit about my background.
Perfect. So the first question that we have is, what are some triggers that people in eating disorder recovery might face?
hmm Yeah, so triggers can be internal or external. So triggers are kind of just like cues to that spark urges to act in eating disorder behaviors. So some internal triggers could be like if you're really stressed, um, could be, perfectionism. Um, Yeah, it could be a lot of things. And then there's some external triggers like food comments, weight comments, things like that. So that would spark someone to kind of have, spark some urges in someone who's in recovery. Um, yeah, so those are some examples.
What would you say regarding those urges, how people in recovery can overcome that? Because obviously they have to go around day to day and they can't just go around and tell everyone like avoid those triggers. It's obviously going to come
Mhm.
up. So how would you describe or what would you say to help overcome those challenges?
Yeah, it's a really good question. That's a good point because you can tell people that are close to you, like, hey, this bothers me, please don't say that, but you really can't control for it in like the broad, spectrum of things. But yeah, so I would say like being aware of your triggers is the first step. Everyone has different triggers, but usually with eating disorder recovery, I would say that like food comments, weight comments, that's pretty much triggering to anyone in recovery. But yeah, certainly being aware of those triggers and then doing, working with a therapist. And cognitive behavioral therapy is super helpful for eating disorders, right? Because there are usually what we call cognitive distortions that are associated with eating disorders that it's really important to kind of reframe those thoughts and look at things in a different way. And that could really help with some of those triggers.
Yeah, definitely. Um, and so what comes with that is like your ED voice. I know that
Mhm.
can get extremely loud, especially during recovery.
Yeah.
And it can be difficult because, a lot of people might want to give up. But, how do these urges kind of subside as people continue their recovery?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the urges get louder because you're going against your eating disorder. And that feels super uncomfortable in the beginning. So like knowing that that's a part of it, that it is really uncomfortable in the beginning, but knowing that there's like that the outcome is going to be better in the long term for you if you stick it out. Sorry, what was the question again?
Like how do those like trigger or like those urges and like subside? Like I guess how would one continue just to go even if it's uncomfortable? Like
Mhm.
what do you think they should reiterate to
Mhm.
themselves, like, even though I'm really uncomfortable and I feel so lost, like this is worth it. Like how would they understand that it is worth it?
Well, sometimes you have to think about like what would it be like long term if I were to stay in my eating disorder? Because that outcome's usually not very good.
Right.
Um, so, people like realizing what's on the line here, like relationships, your health, your future, right? All of those things, like your goals. Like when you have an eating disorder and it's active, you're not usually living according to your values, and able to work towards your goals.
Yeah, and I think
Yeah.
that's what that's like so important. I'm really glad that you brought that up because like
I think in our youth, in our community, it's like you get so stuck in it, especially I think with adolescents, we're so vulnerable. But it's
Hmm.
like, like you said, what's on the line, you aren't living life, and it's like in the long run,
Hmm.
it's so dangerous. But
It is. And I know, and it's so bad right now for,
yeah,
kids because um Hollywood, what's going on with Hollywood and the media, and it's so bad. It's worse than when I was in high school.
yeah. Yeah,
Hmm.
how would you say, like, regarding that too, because, social media has such a huge impact
Hmm.
on especially adolescents, and, we our generation was raised with social
yeah,
media, and so
Hmm.
these actors and models and everyone like are normalizing these unhealthy behaviors.
Yeah.
How would you say people can like, I know with adolescents it's hard to challenge that, but
Hmm.
not give into those ideals and live by their values?
Yeah. That's a good question. I would say it's really important to take social media breaks because if you're on it constantly, then it's really harder, like it's harder to get perspective
Yeah.
and it's harder to listen to your supports or like maybe your parents or your therapist that's telling you like, those the people in Hollywood perpetuating these ideals, they're not healthy. They don't look healthy. They don't, they're, you know, that it's not good for them, you know.
Yeah.
exactly.
Our next question is, what are some challenges? Um, sorry, we just read that. But how can people continue their journey with these like reminders of maybe their issues or their triggers or these actors when they feel like giving up? With we know obviously you can't predict the future, but with that, how can one in recovery overcome that anxiety with what comes with the future and continue on with their recovery?
Mhm. Well, I think it's like kind of connecting with the reasons why you're even in recovery.
Yeah.
Even if, your parent asks that you go to a program or something like that, there's still probably a reason why you're doing it yourself. And like like asking yourself, what is that reason? Like, why am I doing this? And, you know, um, yeah, so basically just connecting with that and being able to like keeping that vision in mind, whether you're doing it so that you can have a better future or that you can have mental peace, or food freedom, or, if you don't want to like spread this to your children, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Another
Hmm.
thing is like you brought up food freedom.
Hmm.
I know that I think this topic, like extreme hunger, is
Hmm.
often overlooked. I think a lot of people, when they have an eating disorder or like when they're trying to recover, they
Hmm.
overlook that idea because like it can be so strong and people don't realize it. But also that I think they have to like what can you say about it and how it's different from like the binge eating? Like people
Hmm.
shouldn't be afraid to give in.
Right, right. Yeah, that is a really good question. And you're right. I don't hear a lot of people talk about it. Um, but if you've been in starvation mode for so long, it's just biological that you're going to be really, really hungry. So, any time that you are like, there's food available, your brain's going to want that food and want a lot of it, right? Because you were previously restricting. So that's what extreme hunger is. And like in recovery, you're going to be extremely, extremely hungry, for a while. I know when I was recovering from my own eating disorder, actually, I had that for the whole first year. Um, and it's different from binging because binging is when you're eating past fullness. Um, and you're kind of ignoring your cues and like eating when you're extremely hungry is you're kind of validating those cues.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Hmm.
How would you say, like, regarding that? I know that can definitely make people feel very uncomfortable and
Hmm.
confused in recovery because they're not, they went from that starvation mode to now their
Mhm.
body is starting to get used to that, and all of a sudden they're going through extreme hunger. I can see how that can set back some people and
Yeah.
cause them to might want to go back to restriction because they feel more in control in that state compared to when they feel like
Mhm.
out of control in recovery. How would you say they can overcome that?
Um, you, you know, when you have an active eating disorder, um, you're so used to eating so little, especially if it's anorexia, right? So, how much you should be eating in your mind is very skewed. So it's like very important to work with a therapist to and a dietitian, right? So you can learn like, well, what is actually a balanced, well-rounded diet. Um, yeah.
Yeah, definitely with that too comes another challenge with recovery. I know, comparing and comparison, going back to social media and friends and, with
Hmm.
adolescents in school and recovery, you're in that state of your anxiety is very high. And how would you say people going through recovery can overcome comparing and, little by little decrease that urge to compare themselves while they're
Hmm.
actively trying to get help too?
Yeah, yeah. Comparing is definitely a big thing, especially among people in high school and in college too, middle school. Just being in school in general, you're around a lot of peers, you're around a lot of people your age. So it's really hard not to compare, right? But I always tell my clients that comparison is not fair because usually you're comparing to someone that has completely different circumstances than you. Or like body comparisons, for example, that's not fair to do, right? Those are unfair comparisons because that person has a completely different genetic makeup than you. And then also, different biology.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Right.
Um, and also regarding comparison, with recovery comes, other mental health challenges, like
Hmm.
people, depending on their circumstance, can, struggle with depression or anxiety or OCD, like multiple things. How would you say those come into play with recovery, and how can someone going through recovery also balance overcoming, OCD urges or compulsions or
Hmm.
like heightened anxiety or depression?
Yeah. So actually there's a theory that eating disorders are basically OCD, right? So the obsession is basically your body or, what you're eating, right? Or exercise. And then the compulsions are restricting, binging, or other, compensatory behaviors.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. How would you say people recovering through this can, not even with OCD, but depression and anxiety come along with recovery? How would you
Mhm.
say people can, it already feels very overwhelming in recovery, but having those along, how would you say like balancing those
Mhm.
challenges and trying to, recover from behaviors from all those aspects?
Right. Yeah. Well, it is normal to feel more anxious in recovery, especially in the beginning stages, because, like I said earlier, you're not listening to your eating disorder anymore, and that with that comes a lot of discomfort. With depression, I guess it would depend on why the person was depressed, if they felt isolated in recovery, because I know that can certainly happen, because it does in recovery, it takes a lot of someone's energy and a lot of someone's time, right? So they might feel isolated from their peers. Um, so yeah, it would really depend on why, but I would say it's really important to access your support system, spend time with friends, spend time doing mindful activities, being out in nature, connecting with your five senses, things like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's all our questions, but
Mhm.
yeah, I love how um giving insight into how people can go about recovery because it's so hard. Like I
Mhm.
I can understand how it's so difficult and people can feel so uncomfortable, but it's like there's like so much more to life. And like there's it sounds so cliche, but genuinely there is like a light
Mm-hmm.
on the other side.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, we appreciate your insight and joining this podcast with us.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. I
Of
really
course.
appreciate it.